how do you maximize your home climbing wall design? If you are in the middle of a project building your climbing wall at home, or you're in those beginning stages of building a climbing wall, this is definitely a video that you're going to want to watch. Now, if you have already built a if you've already built a climbing wall at home, then you know that you're always in the design phase. So buckle up. Let's talk about how you can maximize your home climbing wall design. I also want to let you know that this video is going to be a little bit different than my normal videos, where I am going to do very limited editing. I may do some things like pretend I have some people helping me in the background where they can throw up a picture like, here's a picture of me when I was a kid, or something that's a little bit more appropriate, like this is a climbing wall design that I did. But all of these odd parts where I stop with my speech that I edit out as I'm going through and editing, you're going to feel that, because I want this to be a little bit more real, so you have me. I am going to do one thing though. I'm going to add the intro here. My friend made this song for the intro and I love it. So let's let that roll. Oh yeah. So one of the things that happens at my house is, as I'm editing my videos, my kids hear this all the time, and they know that at the end of the song, I say, "Oh yeah." And they join in with that, and I just love it. So there's a little tidbit about that. Now let's jump into this topic of maximizing your home climbing wall design. One of the viewers of the channel here reached out to me through email and sent me a couple of questions and asked for some help. So let me show you his climbing wall design here. Now, if you notice, this is built on a 4-post system. So he has the 4 posts and he's wrapping this on the inside of those 4 posts, which is just fine. A lot of times you'll see it wrapped on the outside of those 4 posts, and that's for fall zones. You want to make sure that your fall zones are okay, and that when you fall off of the wall, which hopefully you're pressing and pushing yourself hard enough that you are falling off just because you can't do it yet. That's how we progress and get better, as we push ourselves to that breaking point, or that point where we are failing naturally, so we can learn and progress beyond that. Fall zones are important with home climbing walls, just as important as they are with commercial climbing gyms as well. Keep that in mind. Another thing that we want to do is we want to make these climbing walls, especially home climbing walls, as versatile as possible. Now, one of the books that I got when I was really young that helped me learn how to build climbing walls is this book right here, which I'm going to pretend that my editor is throwing up on the screen. This guy right here. Okay, so this book, that's the book that, one of the books that I used to help me get into building climbing walls. And one of the things that I remembered taking from that is the variety of terrain. You want to add variety of terrain, but you don't want to overcomplicate it. So with the home climbing wall, I think this is more true today than it has ever been before in the history of what I would call woodies, home climbing walls. And you want to just keep it fairly simple. Yes, you do want to have a little bit of terrain change, but you want to keep it as simple as possible. These different angles that we're having come up here, like Nels has this corner piece right here where you see just in that corner piece, there's 3 different angle changes, and it would actually be better for the long-term experience and easier to build if we took all of those 3 planes and just kind of flattened it out and made it bigger. Now, this is going to make it a little bit more boring as far as the terrain of the climbing wall goes. However, we have these cool little things that here in America we call volumes. Now, volumes in other parts of the world, they're considered what we would call large holds. When I say volumes, I'm talking about pieces that we attach to the climbing wall that changes the geometric shape of the wall and is adaptable for climbing holds to be put on that. So it adds to the terrain of the climbing surface and not really a climbing hold. So these volumes we can put on there and we can change that terrain up. So when we get bored with that terrain, which can happen in a week or can happen in 3 months, we can take those volumes off and move them around and position them differently so it changes up the terrain entirely. Having big planes on your wall allows you to do that a lot more easily, and it's easier to build. So it's a win-win situation. Take that into consideration. Now, with these planes, I would say that you want to avoid dead vertical climbing walls. If you have a small wall, keep it at 10-degree angle between, well, let me back up here. Okay, getting a little over in front of myself. The angles that you want to keep on a climbing wall at home, if you're confined for space, and this is just my opinion and what I've seen works best, is between 10 degrees and 40 degrees. Now, of course, it's fun to go further than that, and it's also fun to have some slab features as well. So, there are differences, but if you've got a small wall, anywhere between 10 and 40 degrees. Now, let's say you have the back of your garage, you're building a climbing wall, and you have a 16-foot space that you can span it across. I would say in a 16-foot space, let's say you got 10-foot ceilings, I would have 3 different angles on there, maybe a 10 or a 15. 15 works great. 15, 30, and 40 or 45. Keep it easy. Although 45 is just getting a little bit more of a roof. And roof climbing is super fun. It's really fun to do. I love roof climbing, but it's a little bit different than most of the climbing that you're going to do, because that movement of pulling yourself upward is now more of like a movement that you would do on a monkey bar, where you're, I don't want to say swinging across the roof, but I mean, that's kind of what you're doing. There can be a lot of core involved, but it's a different move. And if you want to create that, let's say we have our wall that's 16 feet long, and we have a 15, 30, and a 45. We can start over there at the 15 and have some volumes coming off where we're climbing on the underside of those volumes and coming over and then finishing out on the 40. And you can get this 16-foot roof that you're coming through and then up onto the 40 where it feels like you're roof climbing. That's the magic that can happen with volumes on your home climbing walls. So keep that in mind. It's magical stuff. Let me get into some of these questions that Nels asked through this email, and it's also going to help everyone else, I think. Comment down below if this has helped you. Also, if you want to send me some questions, feel free to do that. I would love to answer them if I can. So some of the other questions that Nels asked is the crash pad. He wanted to know a little bit more about the crash pad that I recently made on the channel. And if you haven't seen that, I will send a link down in the description below where you can check that out. It actually worked really awesome. I can't believe that I hadn't done it before. It was an idea that I had back in the end of 2019, beginning into 2020. After I made my last crash pads for the very last wall that I built in Clarksville Climbing Gym. I thought, I made these big bags and it was fairly hard to make a bag versus this idea. And that is just kind of more like an upholstered seat where you make a wood frame for the base, you put your foam in there, and then you stretch your fabric over that and staple it to the bottom side of that wooden frame. And I did that for the wall that we're sitting under here. I've also done that for another home wall that I built for someone else. And it is working fantastic. I absolutely love how it's worked out. Now, the one that I'm sitting on right now, I've got a couple of dogs, and one of my dogs thought it would be really fun to try to dig a hole. I don't know if he was trying to bury a bone. Maybe he was trying to get a piece of chicken that my kids accidentally dropped. I don't know. I don't know what he was trying to do, but he was just having a really good time trying to dig a hole. And he did puncture a few holes and made a couple of rips. Even with those rips in there, though, it's holding up extremely well. Make sure that if you do this, go check out those videos, but make sure that you staple the bottom as if you were sewing it together. So there's just a lot of staples that are in there. Also, I had a viewer that recommended getting an automatic electric stapler. Not a bad idea. One of the other questions that Nels asked is, what about paint? Man, I can talk about paint. He specifically asked about bed liner paint, and I would say that the bed liner paint for climbing walls is probably the second best paint that I've ever used for a climbing wall. It works extremely well. And yes, Nels, definitely add texture to it. Just like you would add texture to all of the other videos that I've made with latex paint, which, by the way, is one of the worst paints that you can use for a climbing wall, but it does work. You need to seal it with something other than latex. You can't just leave it latex paint. You've got to put a clear coat over the top of it that is harder. So you're going to screen your sand. You're going to add your sand. I like to add the sand right after I put a fresh coat of paint on there. I'll let that tack up and almost dry. Blow it off with some air to make sure that loose stuff is out, and then I'll cover it with another coat of paint. And with bed liner, one coat over the top of the sand has worked phenomenal. I just reached out to a customer that I built a home wall for last year and asked him about it, and he said that it's working great. So yes, bed liner works good for climbing walls. Now, if you want to get a little bit more expensive, and bed liner paint is not cheap, but it is cheaper than 2-part epoxy paint, which is the absolute best paint that you can use for a climbing wall. It works fantastic. You're never going to have problems with holds sticking, or I've never had problems with holds sticking to it, and it's a really hard surface and easy to clean. So there's one more question that Nels asked here, and it's all about framing. So if you're building a climbing wall that has all of these intricate different angles to it, it can get really complicated with the framing. The wood framing needs to be behind there to support it. However, you got to realize that you are using 3/4 inch plywood, so that can run. You don't have to have something supporting it right there behind the seams. You do have to have something that's connecting the seams, obviously, but if you need to run that plywood like a little long, like 2 inches long, and then use some screws through the side, putty over the top, you can do that, and it'll hold it quite well. You're going to be doing some compound miter cuts if you're getting into the real tricky stuff. But again, I would keep it simple, keep the planes nice and simple, and then add that spice to your climbing wall with volumes. So I guess it comes down to really, how can you maximize your climbing wall design not just your climbing wall design, but your DIY home climbing wall design. And I would say to keep it simple and also keep volumes in mind for changing up that terrain to keep you going. Now, I have several build plans. This is build plans that I have on my Etsy account. This is the smallest wall that I would ever build. I can't remember how high it sits, but our ceilings in this house are actually a little bit lower than 8 feet. And this is 5 feet wide. It is if you are on a really, really tight budget and you're building it mainly for your kids, this wall right here, which is actually, it's a modified campus board, it works great. My little kids love it a lot. They're back here climbing all the time. But for us bigger kids, we need something a little bit bigger. I would say the minimum size that you want for a climbing wall is going to be 8 feet wide and 8 feet tall. The absolute minimum that you want to build. If you can't build that, man, I guess you could build an outdoor wall. I've shared my thoughts on outdoor walls. I have an outdoor wall right now, actually, and I've climbed on it, I think, maybe 4 times. And that's just because it's not... I love climbing outdoors, but climbing on this is not the same as climbing on real rock. Yet I have to put up with all of those things like high humidity or rain, mud, or heat or cold when you're climbing on an outdoor wall. And yeah, I'm being a little picky, but I guess, when you get a little older, you can be a little bit picky. There's my take on it. Volumes really help out as far as helping you maximize your climbing wall design, so don't discount them. They are really hard to do on small walls like this to add those volumes because the wall itself is just, it's small. So when you get beyond that 8 feet, that's really where you're going to be starting to look into those volumes. Avoid dead vertical. If it's only for little kids, maybe add some dead vertical in there. But having just a slight overhang is really going to help you push that on. And I think that's about it. I think that you got it's a great thing to have a home climbing wall, especially if the gym is a long ways away and it's really hard to get to, or your climbing destination is a long ways away. It allows you to get that movement that your body needs and have some fun. So if you've been thinking about building a climbing wall, get out there and do it. Go check out my Etsy store. I've got a couple of really good build plans on there that have been designed to be as budget friendly as possible, where you're using the maximum amount of the materials that you're putting your hard-earned money into. And I've also designed it so it's as easy as possible. I try to take inspiration from Lego manuals where you're going through and building that. So I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. So if you're a builder, you're going to get these build plans and you're going to look at it, and it's going to be a little different than reading blueprints, but it's made for just somebody that is just trying to build their first wall and have a good time. So I hope that this has helped. Thanks for watching and sticking to the end. Let me know down in the comments below if you like this a little bit more raw like this. And I will see you next time right here on Climber Dad. Rock on. Do I say climb on? I'm trying to say rock on.